Hi, I'm Jo.
And I'm Kelly.
And this is the new Start Inspiring podcast.
If you're someone who looks after an organisation and really cares about your people, productivity and performance, this podcast is for you.
You're going to get advice and valuable insight.
We're going to bring you tools and information that you can apply directly to your business.
So if you really value your people,
listen to the Start Inspiring podcast.
Your future self is going to thank you for it. Hey, Happy New Year!
Happy New Year!
When is it okay to stop saying Happy New Year?
Probably now.
Anyway, here we are, 2025.
Well, I'm so excited for this year.
So am I. It's going to be epic.
It is.
I think we've probably said that most years, but yeah, it is. It's going to be a big year. Lots going on. Always lots going on in our professional space.
Yeah.
And yeah, another year of making work for everyone.
So, what are we going to spend 2025 talking about?
Yeah, interesting, isn't it? Because, there are so many things. As we know, all roads still lead back to leadership. I think that's still going to be a significant piece in 2025. I think talent and really making sure that organisations, whatever level of organisational maturity, have got the talent they need. And they are really focusing on how do you grow and develop those people to be the best they can be while they're with you. I think that will continue to be really important. AI has to continue to blow our minds.
Yes.
And how can we now, as people functions, start to gain some benefit out of it?
Yeah.
Because I still sense there's still some, I don't know, people are a bit scared still of what it might be able to do.
Yeah.
And I think it could add enormous value to our function.
To the whole organisation.
To the whole organisation.
We really are starting to see organisations adopting a generative AI. I think, we need to look at it through two lenses. What efficiency can we gain from it, and how do we make people's work more enjoyable?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's lots of case studies of organisations not then seeing that as a cost reduction exercise, but seeing that as a growth exercise. So how do we actually get our people working on the stuff that generates more value for our customers and more value for our organisation? Yeah. And then I think it's actually really understanding how tech can be a game changer for your organisation's offering.
Yeah.
And if it is not on your agenda as a CPO,
it should be.
I'd highly recommend it is.
We need a podcast just on that.
Absolutely.
Don't we?
I think we should bring in an expert on that space.
That would be so
Definitely.
good. Yeah, so
Definitely.
good. Well, one age-old challenge that comes out of every survey, every focus group, every conversation you have with leaders, whether they're founders or whether they're, a CEO or a board, every organisation I've worked with, communication is something.
Yeah, too much, not enough, inconsistent.
I'm always telling them, why
Yeah.
can't they understand? It's so much in the communication space. And I think it's interesting because, as we know, psychological safety is the heart of any organisational success, really. If you think about how you could get a team to work better together, it all comes down to creating psychological safety. And naturally, of course, then communication is a significant part of creating that.
Huge part of creating that. And in actual fact, I heard someone describe psychological freedom the other day.
Love that.
I really like that, because I think sometimes, certainly the journalists, the press have coined psychological safety in a way where it feels like we've got to make this lovely, safe environment for our people, and of course we do. But what we really mean by psychological safety or psychological freedom is I feel courageous enough to be innovative, to try new things, to challenge the status quo, to challenge each other in a really lovely way. But the environment fosters that, nurtures that, and as a result we are better together.
Yeah. It doesn't mean you create a nice, easy place where people do everything they want to do and no one gets any work done. No. We're providing pizza every Thursday. That is not what we're trying to create.
Absolutely.
And I think it's that thing about psychological freedom. I love the more positive twist on it, because I think psychological safety, to me, it sounds a bit health and safety-esque, doesn't it? Not that that's not hugely important, which of course it is, but I like the fact that it's a switch to a much more positive language around actually what we get from having psychological safety is this freedom and the opportunity that freedom can bring is so important. And as we know, all of that is built. I always think that cultures are built like one conversation at a time, right? So that piece around actually how do we change a culture of an organisation comes down to that. And of course, this world of trust between two people and psychological safety being kind of organisational or team-based, so around more people. And what you get if you don't have either. So, we'll bring up on screen a grid that we often use when we're working with teams, which has, trust or guarded relationships. So between two people, that's the kind of interactions that you would have. And then when you bring that out to a team or organisationally, you'd have psychological safety or toxic politics. And I think it's so interesting when we do that with teams and groups, how they feel about toxic politics being in existence in their organisation and what we can do about that. And of course, the reality is it starts with the left-hand side of the grid, if you like, this piece around build trust.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think if you think about what we mean by that, what we mean is, either in an individual relationship, one-on-one, or as a group, how do I believe that I'm going to be treated benevolently when things happen? So and communication, sometimes we think about it as exporting out, and actually it's about behaviours, it's about the way we treat each other, and it's definitely two-way, and much more about what we do, really.
It really is.
If you think about communication, 7% is the words we speak, the rest is our tone, our body language, the authenticity of our messaging.
Which is, when you think about that, then the interesting lens of our much more remote world and or our global operations that are, obviously we work with a number of global organisations. You're losing a lot of that in either a video call. Now you might be able to see them, but they might turn their camera off, or you might end up having to only speak by phone. There are blockers, barriers to being able to communicate effectively with each other. And so important to kind of have those in mind, isn't it?
And yet, if we do it well, we can overcome all of those things. So if I think during COVID, I was going through my coaching qualification. Originally, it was face-to-face. The organisation I did it with had never, ever anticipated doing it remotely. Now,
I did mine remotely.
They choose to do it remotely because what they've done is created the environment, that psychological safety, if you like, between individuals and groups. And they've done that by really listening, by seeking to understand, by creating real connections and trust. That actually, I saw a post just yesterday, they're probably not going to go back face to face because there are all the many benefits of doing it remotely, and they've managed to get the same level of feedback about how safe, how it feels, and that there is psychological safety of the group.
So. And I guess in reality, when you think about coaching specifically, actually a lot of that is happening remotely too. So the experience of learning remotely replicates probably what you'll do more of now anyway. One of the things about communication that really resonates with me is a slide that we'll show you about the many connections, and thinking about our podcast that we did previously around scaling businesses. And as businesses grow and change and you start to have more points of communication, how much more challenging it becomes. So the slide that will be on the screen is one about the 14 points, and it shows you how much more complicated communication becomes the more points that exist.
And those points are what, individual people, aren't they? So, so if you have 14 people, there's something ridiculous like 93 different strands of communication.
And so that just kind of demonstrates how complicated it is. And also in that space of organisations that are growing, adjusting and refining and continuing to kind of work on how do we get communication to work well here,
Yeah.
is going to be contextual, and it needs to be right, the right fit for right here,
Yes.
for right now.
Yes.
But also our minds to, you know, where's the organisation going to?
Yeah.
So it's okay to create a system of communication for right now, but actually we're going to double in a year. What's that going to mean?
Yeah. And I think we talk about communication, funnily enough, a lot. We don't do a lot about it.
No.
So I always feel it's very often the case. I go into an organisation and communication is still seen as a nice to do, not necessarily a necessary to do. And it's not given quite the level of focus that it should, given the impact that it has on a business. There's some significant research that the lack of information and communication within organisations is costing the UK economy £37 billion in businesses.
Wow.
And actually that's like, well, that's everybody else. Well, no. Actually, if you're in an SME or a scale up, it's costing you about £12,000 per employee.
That's a lot of money.
12,000. So you're looking at all these cost saving opportunities, you're looking at these growth opportunities. One thing that is within your gift that you can do right now is get better at communicating. Why is that important? Because that increases your customers' satisfaction. It increases the likelihood that individuals will do what you need them to do. It's holding them accountable for making sure the things that you want and need happen. Significantly engaged, Gallup tells us, when they know what's expected of them and they're able to then execute.
Yeah.
So when you start to list, well, what does good communication actually give you? So we know that great communication, or those organisations that communicate effectively, have 18% increased productivity and a 21% increase in profitability. Because people are not wasting their time trying to work out what's expected of them or where to find something or what to do next.
Yeah.
So such rich picking on your doorstep.
Rich picking. And there's so many easy steps to take, isn't there, in this space?
Yeah.
I mean, so often I'll work with an organisation and they'll say, well, we've told them all this. We've communicated the mission and the vision.
Told them once.
We told them when we launched it last year. And I suppose for me, that piece around really galvanising people behind your mission or your vision or your purpose, depending the language you use. And how do you really create that genuine connection between what people do, great work for customers, and align that to the purpose of the organisation? Because that's where you get the best bang for your buck, isn't it? You've got,
Absolutely.
say, 200 people all marching in the same direction towards the same purpose.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess at a point that's enough. And then you get much bigger and more complicated, as you've said. And so the easiest way to create simplicity from complexity is to communicate effectively that line of sight. So, you know, Simon Sinek says it beautifully, doesn't it? What's the why?
What's the why?
What's the how? What's the what? Was it the other way around? It's the why, what, how, isn't it? So Simon Sinek says it beautifully. What's the why? What's the what? And then quite often leave the how for your team to work that out. But if you change that into organisational context, what that means is, why do we exist? What is our purpose? Why should we all get out of bed? What is it we need to achieve this year, next year, the year after? And then how are we going to do that? And getting that granularity to an individual's, how does your role contribute to that what and that why? And when you've got that, magic happens.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's so empowering, isn't it? Because you are absolutely providing those guide rails. We often talk about that, don't we? About actually, we're all really clear about why, bit clear about the what, and we're empowering you to do the how, which is really nice.
Because actually, we might not have the best answers. Yeah, I've had so many examples in my career now where we've got crystal clear about what we need to achieve. So X £1 million saving, X £1 million growth, whatever that might be. And encourage, because of course communication is two-way, right? Encourage the whole team to come back with ideas. And of course, small individual things lead to this big overall effect. But because it's their ideas, because they thought about it, and then if you give them the empowerment, exactly as you say, to follow that through, it's like a tsunami of brilliant ideas. And then every so often, it's a bit like distributing your bets. Every so often, you see the most phenomenal idea from the least expected place.
Yeah.
And I've just seen it so many times where an individual who isn't even in that part of the business comes up with an idea, or they've seen something when they've been traveling, or they've looked at one of our competitors and we've not been paying attention to the same things.
Yeah.
And they make a suggestion, and it's gold dust.
Oh, absolutely. And I think it's a sign of good leadership when you're able to go, my ideas might not be the best. Actually, how can I gather or encourage innovation in my organisation? Because, there's so much opportunity to bring those things to fruition. And I've seen it work really well where, we've had kind of Dragon's Den type things happen in organisations where people bring an idea, then get to work on the project and take that through to some kind of fruition. Amazing development opportunity for people who are maybe in their, their first roles in an organisation. And of course, for those people in maybe entry-level roles closest to the customer, they actually know the customer much better.
Yep.
And such a good opportunity then for that two-way conversation to be happening. Because I think often, certainly in the people world, we think of two-way communication as being primarily about, well, how does it feel to work here? And getting that to the exec or board. I'm not saying that's not important. Of course, it absolutely is. But also it is about the customer voice being heard at the board and making sure, because those two things are so close together, the customer and the people, and ensuring, I think, an element of, we talked about it before, our experience for our customer should be outstanding, and it should be for our people too. And really, bringing that to life, that internal focus too.
Yes.
On how does it really feel to work here?
Yes. And it's natural, isn't it, to expect that how it feels for them is then portrayed in the external space.
Of course, because that how they feel naturally links to how they then treat a customer.
Yeah.
Of course it does.
That's the stuff I love about being in the people space, because of course it does.
Of course it does.
Of course it does. And so what then?
Yeah.
So what must we do? And there's a couple of bits, the first one you just talked about, which is actually the leader role shifts. As the organisation gets bigger, the leader role shifts into, let me paint a picture of where we think we're going, where we're trying to go, our aims, our ambitions, and let's do that really clearly.
Yeah.
But you are no longer necessarily the executor of what needs to happen. So you have to do such a good job of explaining the outcome, not necessarily the how, but the outcome, the what good looks like for people to be able to create that for you. And then you've got huge amounts of experience of this in organisations. What's some of your best examples that people can do easily?
One of my favourite examples is we had a contact centre environment speaking directly with patients. So whoever your customer is, whether it's patient or a paying customer in a more commercial sense, there's still the point of inflection, the point of interaction between the two. And so what we did was we asked colleagues in the contact centre to host a shift with a member of the senior leadership team. And so the two came together. I obviously went on a shift with somebody, and you experienced their world.
Nice.
For a shift. And you got to find out more about them and find out what their world's like and frankly find out what pisses them off.
Yes.
And then you got a chance to do something about it.
Yes.
So I think that was probably one of my favourite moments.
Yeah.
I've done lots of that type of thing about walking the walk,
yeah.
Spending time in departments, but I think that was such a organisational wide thing that we did. Kind of felt a lot of impact, and I suppose that two-way piece is so important to get right.
Yes.
And really thinking about, actually, is it feasible to do that one-to-one? Does it need to be a small group? Is it a big group? You break into small groups. Really starting to give people the comfort that they can speak out and we'll do something about it.
Yes.
And I think that's the critical thing. you have to do something with it.
I agree. That's the trust, right?
Yeah, because they've trusted you with their time,
Yeah.
with their feedback. They might have really had to, get the courage to speak up.
Yeah.
And maybe that's not in a group. It might have been dropping an email. It might have been providing, other tech or ways to be able to contact. But either way, that's actually their problem, and it means a lot to them at that time.
Yes.
And so we should treat that with the care that it deserves.
Yes.
Now, we might not always be able to solve everything, but that doesn't mean to say that, you just don't, you don't let it just go.
No.
You'll explain why, we can't do something with that at the moment.
Yeah.
But this is what we are doing.
Yeah.
So I think that two-way piece is so important. And that's where you'll get that innovation piece too. Really working with people and saying to them, what are the things that are causing you a problem?
Yeah.
Actually, can I break down the barriers to enable you to solve it yourself?
I think that's really important, because that's what I see us do a lot. And as we expand, we can't continue to do that, is we encourage employees to bring a problem to us. That's what I see a lot.
Yeah.
And then we take the responsibility to
For that
solve
problem.
it
Yeah.
for them. And in actual fact, we have adults working in our environment that outside of the workplace do the most amazing things.
Yeah.
They're very competent individuals who buy houses, buy insurance, coach the local football teams. They do all these things. They demonstrate leadership as club leaders and all sorts of things, community-led activities. And so they have those skills. We don't need to take those things off them. Our role becomes, what do you need from us to let you do it?
Yeah.
And when that starts to happen,
Yeah.
it's wonderful. Can you imagine being a senior leader going, actually, my job is to talk to you, make sure you're clear about what's expected,
Nice.
and then listen to you about what you need from me for you to be able to do it.
Yeah. So empowering, isn't it?
It's easier said than done.
I know.
of
Well, that
course.
is true. That is true. Yeah, and I think I know, busy work life, communication is something easy to drop. I think the other slight bugbear of mine is when an organisation gets to a size where an internal comms person or team is required, I think everyone thinks they've outsourced their requirement to communicate to another. And absolutely, they can help develop us and help us to be better communicators. They can absolutely help with a strategic direction in terms of communication, understanding our segments of people that exist within our organisation, thinking about our different ways of communicating, the different channels for what message, etc. But actually, as a leader, as a manager, actually as a fellow employee, we're all responsible for communicating and keeping that communication going.
Be human.
Just be human, shall we?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, agreed. It's a really interesting one. It's not an easy one.
No.
But it's actually, if you think you're communicating enough or communicating in the right way, you probably
Are not. No.
So how can you, as you grow, actually how can you spend more time communicating? How can you double down on it? Because it's worth those significant wins for you.
Yeah.
A plus, 21% profitability. That's huge.
Yeah.
But it still feels like a nice to do. So how can actually, if you're a senior leader in the business, how do you actually purposefully put time in your diary? Because that's always the truth teller, as we say. How do you purposely plan to communicate and create fast followership so your organisation can move at speed?
Yeah.
How can you do it?
Yeah. So that's the conundrum.
Yeah. And actually, maybe ask the team.
Definitely ask the team. Definitely ask the team. Yeah, I mean, we've done some work with a few organisations in this space, right? And exactly that. You find yourself helping them to understand why this is so difficult, but then really getting the team to come up with, well, what could we do differently?
Yeah.
I mean, we all see, don't we, town halls, all hands meetings,
Yeah.
quite a broadcast of things that are happening.
Yes.
Actually, how can you shift that to its next
Yes.
space?
Yes.
How can you use technology I mean, everyone's on a Slack group or a Teams chat, etc. Actually keep a drip
Yeah.
of what's happening.
Yeah. And also think about the reason we're communicating. So is it I'm communicating to let people know something? I'm communicating to hold people accountable. What's the message? I quite like a tool called MAD. So what's the message? Who are the audience? And what's the method of delivery?
Yeah.
And making sure that that's as unique as the situation itself.
Yeah. What a lovely takeaway to leave people with.
MAD communication. Thanks so much for listening to the Start Inspiring podcast. I'm Kelly.
And I'm Jo, and we look forward to seeing you in the next episode.